You're listening to KZUU 90.7 FM Pullman. We're a broadcast service of the ASWSU. I'm your host, DJ Daisy. Welcome back to another episode of What's New Wazzu. I am joined by an English professor today. Would you go ahead and introduce yourself, please?
My name is Jamie Flathers. She, her pronouns. And you wanted me to say one more thing, but I forgot what it was.
Your title, I guess.
What I
classes you teach?
My official title is Teaching Assistant Professor.
Okay.
And I teach creative writing and composition and ancient humanities.
Right on. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for taking the time to being here today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So I've taken two of your classes in the past. I've taken 101 and 251. Mm-hmm. And I just want to say I had such a great time in those classes.
Thank you for saying that.
They've had a real noticeable impact on my life. And so that's why I really wanted to have you on this show and like get to know you a little bit more. Because you've had such an impact on me. So thank you.
Your audience can't see it, but I am absolutely blushing.
All right. Well, let's start from the beginning.
Okay.
You're an English professor.
I am.
I want to know when you became a writer. Like, were you born a writer? Did you become a reader first and then a writer? How did it come down?
This is such a good question. I don't believe writers are born necessarily.
Okay.
But also, I have been one for so long that it's practically a physical characteristic.
Yeah.
So I'm afraid I can't answer that question. I can tell you about some things that I think of as milestones.
Okay.
But I don't know that there was like a moment where I was like, this one, like this thing right here.
Fair.
I definitely was a reader first. I loved The Babysitter's Club.
Okay. Not familiar.
It's just all out of proportion to what it was. No, you're not familiar. You were not their target audience. But so I had this love of reading and I read all the time. And I got in trouble for reading and I would get told, put the book down, go outside, play with your siblings. And I remember once writing a story for a class assignment around Thanksgiving. And I don't remember what the story was about, but I remember that people kept asking me to read it to them.
Really?
And I remember being like absolutely floored by that and just like I memorized it. And so whenever anybody told me, hey, I want to hear the story, I would just literally recite it to them.
Wow.
And
how old were you?
Oh gosh, that was probably third grade.
Third grade?
Yeah, it was probably 9.
Wow.
9, something like that.
And people already want to hear your story?
Yes.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
They wanted to hear me talk, discourse on writing. And I also remember when I was 11, my grandmother died, and I had an aunt wrote a poem about it for my mom, and it made my mom cry.
Oh.
And I was like, I
want to do that.
That's what I want to do. I want to do that to other people. So those were sort of two moments that like really stand out to me as far as like becoming a writer, insofar as that's a verb that we can use to describe the situation.
Cool. Well, thanks for sharing those milestones. I'd say those are as good as any to mark, when you, I guess, I don't know. You're right. You're always like kind of a writer. It's a gray area, I guess. I don't know. I
think everyone is a writer. I think everyone has that in them. I think I think that it has much more to do with being interested in the craft of it and enjoying the process of it, which is something that I think a lot of people love when they're young. But then they go through the American education system and all the creativity gets sucked out of them.
Yeah. And that's something we talked about in the very beginning of your 101 English class, is about the writing process and the way it's taught in school and kind of the way it should be taught, which is much different.
I agree.
And I guess I was going to ask you this question later on, but since we're on the topic, we might as well get to it now.
Okay.
The very first essay that is assigned in English 101 is kind of like an in-depth reflection of your own writing process, which is very different than how you're taught. The writing process is taught in like middle school and high school. It's more linear then, and it's much more circular in real life, and it's better that way.
Yes.
And it has a lot to do with revision, which is the big thing that I remember. And that's something I'd never really used or wanted to do,
Mm-hmm.
was revise what I'd written. And a more circular writing process includes that. So I write a whole essay about my own writing process, but I really want to know about your writing process. When you go to sit down to write, what does that look like?
It depends so much on what I'm writing.
Really?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
The process changes even from piece to piece and even from day to day sometimes.
Wow.
So you'll have to be more specific.
Okay, let's say you're writing a fictional story.
Okay.
And you're writing it for, I don't know what kind of audience you might write that for. Let's say it's a book club. You're
Okay.
writing a piece for a book club. What would that look like?
Well, what I would probably do, I like to try to read a lot before I ever start writing. So if I have an idea for a short story that contains a particular plot point or a particular type of character or a particular type of setting,
Mm-hmm.
I will look for books or short stories that deal with that same thing and look at the ways in which other writers have dealt with that. And I will take inspiration from that. And then I like to start by thinking about character and what kinds of things a character wants.
Interesting.
Because one of the most important things about fiction, I think, about writing fiction, is having something at stake. Like a character, there needs to be some tension, there needs to be danger. So thinking about what a character wants, what's in their way, and what's at stake for them if they can't get it.
It's like the foundation of that tension, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that is pretty likely to change throughout the course of what's going on. For example, I'm working on a short story right now that's about time travel.
Ooh.
And I've never written anything like this before, but I'm fascinated by. Have you ever seen Back to the Future? Have you seen this? Okay, so you know how Marty sometimes has like these artifacts of his native timeline, like the picture of him and his siblings are slowly disappearing,
Yes,
right?
yes.
So it makes me think like, so if it's possible that you can have an artifact from one timeline and be in another timeline, then like, what does that do to human memory? Like, how do people remember these kinds of things? And so I was also thinking about like, have you ever read or heard or watched a story where like desperate people, like a desperate culture, like sends people back in time to try to stop something from happening so that their world will not exist?
I think Austin Powers is one silly example of that.
Yes! Oh my god. I forgot about that. So I started thinking about like the people that get left behind in that native timeline. Like what happens to them? Do they disappear immediately? Do things start disappearing around them? Like, what does that look like?
Interesting.
So I started by just sort of playing around with the setting and thinking about the character who I'd sort of played around writing about before. And I'm having a little bit of difficulty because I can't seem to get the momentum that I need to get a complete first draft done.
Okay.
That's if I have my way, I will write a first draft as quickly as humanly possible, which is really difficult for me. It's difficult for me to outrun my internal editor. But so
interesting.
So it so much of that changes based on what it is that I'm writing. I mean, I've written.
You don't always start with the character, is what you're saying?
No. Sometimes it starts with an image. Sometimes it starts with a line, like a particular phrase. Sometimes it starts with a title.
Gotcha.
It just so much depends. And I think that the trick is to have a writing process that is flexible enough that you can do different stuff in different situations.
Does the setting of your writing process change as much as where you begin with the writing piece, or do you go to the same place to write every day or every time?
No,
No?
no. In fact, I try to seek out like places that are sort of novel.
Really?
Yeah, I find that to be very helpful. I've written in stairwells and bathtubs and uh, sitting in windows and uh,
That's funny.
like just wherever I can, standing up in my kitchen,
Hmm.
on my phone. Like it just really depends on what I need.
Fair enough. I remember that was one of the exercises that went along with that first essay in your class was switching up the setting and seeing if doing that was beneficial for your process.
I can't believe you remember that.
Oh yeah, of course I remember that because I remember it did not help me.
Well, it doesn't. That's the thing. Some things are not helpful to some people,
Yeah.
which is why I have to try a bunch of stuff.
That's cool. Well, it's cool hearing about your process, having told you so much about mine. Right on. So we jumped into you being a writer as of now, but I'm kind of interested about how you became like a writing professor. So I know you got your bachelor's degree in creative writing at Linfield College.
Yes.
Where is Linfield College?
It's in McMinnville, Oregon.
Oregon. Are you from Oregon?
Yes, I am from Oregon. I'm from well, I was born in Salem, and I grew up about 25 minutes southeast of there.
Okay,
So
cool.
it's sort of halfway between Salem and Albany, if you know anything about Oregon geography.
Yeah,
no, it's about an hour and a half south of Portland.
Okay, gotcha.
So it's in the Willamette Valley, and McMinnville specifically is in a very special little microclimate within the Willamette Valley, which is in between the coast and the Cascades Range in Oregon, and the microclimate is particularly good for growing Pinot Noir grapes.
Really?
So I went to school in wine country.
Whoa, that must be cool.
Yeah, no, it's a very cool place.
Did you enjoy your time there, like being an undergrad?
I had a fantastic time there.
Did you?
Absolutely bonkers good time.
Really?
Yes, 100%.
Is there anything in particular that was fun, like just learning about your classes, or you stuff outside of class?
Well, I met several groups of people that I connected with, and I had never had the opportunity to be that social with that many people before.
Cool.
My high school was very small and very rural, and I did not fit in well there. And so when I finally got to college and I sort of took the circuitous route, I think I was 24 when I transferred there from a community college. And, I was sort of in the thick of it. And there were so many things that I already had done with my life that a lot of undergraduates haven't. So I was like, I feel like I was able to focus on both the social and the academic aspects without getting, what's the word I'm looking for? Without getting overwhelmed by it, I guess is what I'm getting at.
Well, that's great. That's great. After you went and got your bachelor's there, did you go to U of I?
Let's see. So I graduated from college in the spring of 2011, and then I started at the U of I in the fall of 2013.
Gotcha.
So I worked at a call center.
Oh boy.
In between, oh God, Dayton.
That doesn't sound nice.
Oh, it was awful. It was really bad. But, imagine my surprise when none of the big creative writing companies were hiring when I graduated, so.
Yeah. Hey, well, you're here now.
You know what? I am here now.
You've made it a long way from those call centers.
Yes, I have. Although I still have anxiety treats. Does this ever happen to you? Have you had a really terrible job yet?
No, thankfully. I mean, I worked in the food industry, which nobody likes, really.
No,
but
no, I suppose not.
I value the pain I went through there a little bit. I don't know if there's any value in call center.
Well, so I got some good stories.
Do you?
Oh yeah, dude.
What kind of calls?
Well, so we were doing what's called non-emergent medical transportation. Okay. So this is a service that was provided to people on Medicaid in Oregon. So we were working with the Medicaid population. And we also fielded rides for what's called paratransit. So it was a service that was provided by the bus system in the Salem area.
Hmm.
That had sort of handicapped accessible buses that would go pick people up at a predetermined time and drop them off and pick them up again. So
Gotcha.
we fielded a lot of calls, but there were a lot of problems with the system naturally, and there were a lot of people who should have had caretakers making calls for them that were not.
So that sounds
so oh
difficult.
Man, yeah, no, it was a lot to deal with. I got into an argument with a guy once about what day it was.
Oh boy.
Yeah, it was rough.
Sir, it's Wednesday. I
Yeah,
know
no,
it's Wednesday.
I know. I was like, I'm looking at the date in front of me. He's like, I was like, do you have a newspaper? He was like, I do, but they got the date wrong. And I was like, oh.
That's funny.
Anyway,
Anyways.
so yes, in between those two endeavors, I worked at a call center.
Gotcha. So after that, you went to U of I,
Mhm.
and I only recently found out in the emails that preceded this interview that you had your own radio show.
It wasn't like my own radio show. Like, I
Okay.
wasn't the sole host.
Okay, so you worked for a radio
I did.
show.
I
Okay.
did.
I would
So-
love to hear about that.
Okay, so this was something that some friends of mine, fellow graduate students in the MFA program at Idaho, had decided to do. They put together a 1-hour talk show that they called Prosers,
Cool.
where they interviewed fellow students and also, more established writers in the community. And they did that for about a year, and then one of them graduated, and one decided he didn't want to do it again. So I stepped in for that second year.
Nice.
And my friends Garrett and Ross and I would interview people.
Really?
And ask them all kinds of questions, and we would sometimes play games. And just, kind of shot the breeze for about half an hour, and then talked to somebody else for another half an hour. Sometimes people played music. It was a lot of fun.
That sounds like fun.
I really enjoyed doing it.
And what radio station was it?
It was KRFP in Moscow.
KRFP.
90.3.
Right on.
Yes,
Right
and
on.
we had to do station calls.
Yeah.
We had to do station identifications
Yeah.
and PSAs and all kinds of stuff.
That's the MO here. That's awesome. That
Yep.
is awesome. What kind of games would you play?
Well, so sometimes if we had poets on, we would play, is this poetry or a rap lyric?
That's awesome.
I only remember doing that with one of the poets. He was really bad at it. had no facility with rap lyrics, which, to be fair, neither did I. But sometimes we would play a game called Confront Your Reputation,
Oh, boy.
which was exactly what it sounds like. But it was always really sort of wholesome, because everybody liked everybody,
Yeah.
and so
Okay. That sounds so fun though. That's cool.
yeah,
That's cool.
it was a good time.
I might add some games to these interviews going forward.
I think that's a fantastic idea.
Right? Like a little
Absolutely.
segment?
Yeah.
Like a little game segment?
Yeah,
I think that'd be
exactly.
fun. Thank you for the inspiration.
You're welcome.
I'm going to start mulling on that.
You know what? That's what I'm here for.
Right on. Okay, well, I've got lots of questions for you. I would love to know if you prefer fiction, nonfiction, or poetry reading. Which do you prefer to read? What's your favorite? If you
That's
had
like
to
asking
choose
which
one.
limb I prefer.
Pick
Dayton?
one. Pick one.
Man. Well, okay. So my first love was fiction. So I guess I'll stump for fiction. That's what my concentration was in the MFA.
Oh, really?
Yes, that
And
was.
what is the MFA?
It stands for Master of Fine Arts.
Okay.
And there are a number of types of MFAs that you can get. There are ones that are in art. There are ones that are in theater. And there are ones in creative writing.
Right on.
That's what I have.
Gotcha. Oh, really?
Yeah, and generally speaking, you can concentrate in poetry, fiction, or nonfiction
Within that.
within that degree field.
Gotcha. And yours is in fiction.
Mine is in fiction.
Right. Well, that's a good answer then to that question. I know that was a struggle having to pick one.
I'll never forgive you for this.
Do you have any pieces of fiction that you'd recommend reading? Like a number one or?
So I just finished rereading for just the umpteenth time. I don't even know how many times I've read it, but I think that I wish that I could force everyone to read Beloved by Toni Morrison.
Beloved.
It's so hard to read
Really?
because it's about a woman, a formerly enslaved woman who runs away and makes it to Ohio with her children, and it's such a richly layered narrative, but it's difficult to read because it is an unflinching look at chattel slavery in America.
Really?
But the writing is so beautiful, and Toni Morrison was such a wise and humane and compassionate person, and it comes out in her writing, and it's so beautiful, but like aching and not for the faint of heart.
Gotcha.
Fiction wise.
Yeah, it does sound like a tough read, but but worth it.
Totally. Anything by Toni Morrison is going to be worth it.
Is she one of your favorite artists or favorite authors?
Absolutely, yes. Yes, she's an OG.
Right on. Have you read The Hail Mary Project by any chance?
By Andy Weir?
Yeah.
No, I haven't. I haven't read anything by him.
That is the first book that I've really read. Your class inspired me that I wanted to become a reader, and then over the summer I acted upon that, and I read that book first, and it blew my mind. It was so fun. I'm
so glad, Dayton. That's amazing.
Yeah, it was great. It was a sci-fi book.
Yeah.
So, and I'm a science major, so I really loved the attention to detail, and then it was creative too, and like just thought-provoking. It was cool.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I'm teaching a science fiction and fantasy writing class.
Really?
Next semester. I mean, I'm teaching it this semester too, but if anyone out there is interested, I'm gonna plug for English 109.
That's awesome. Right on. What is the English number? That's like the number of the class.
It's English 109.
English 1. Okay, gotcha. So I just remembered right now. Before this interview, I came from an academic advising appointment, and the time to enroll in classes has opened. So I need to quickly enroll in my classes while we conduct this interview. Oh, if that's okay.
That is the kind of multitasking that I really admire. Fair enough.
Let's get back to this interview.
All right.
So, in my little research going into this, which is Jamie Flathers, enter.
Awesome. Yeah, okay.
I found out that you work for the Blood Orange Review.
Oh, yes, it is.
Which I had never heard of. So, would you mind sharing with me and the audience what the Blood Orange Review is and what your role as the fiction editor is?
So, the Blood Orange Review is a literary magazine that is run by volunteers in the English department at WSU.
So it's a WSU related.
Yes.
Cool.
Yes, it is.
Very cool.
And we publish fiction, nonfiction, and poetry by emerging writers, people who have not been widely published elsewhere, and also visual art. And we're run by faculty, and each faculty member oversees a group of undergraduate and graduate interns and guest editors and assistant editors and co-editors. And I'm the fiction editor. I co-edit with Julian Ankeny, who is on the Vancouver campus.
Okay.
And I've been doing that work for almost a year now. In January, it'll be a year.
Cool. How does somebody submit their work to this?
They start up a submittable account.
Okay.
And then they go to our page and submittable.
Oh, well, that was easy.
Yes, it is very simple. Or you can go to bloodorangereview.com. Gotcha. There's a link to the submissions page there, and that will give you an understanding of, you can look at our submission guidelines and what we're looking for as far as each genre, and you can pay a small reading fee and submit your work.
Cool. And anyone can submit their work? Or how does that work?
If you have been affiliated with WSU, there is some sort of a waiting period that you have to go through. I forget exactly how long it is.
Okay.
So WSU students, after they graduate, have to wait a little while, and I don't know what the rules are about other affiliated people. But we can look that up too.
Cool. Well, that sounds awesome. I really had no idea that there was this review and it was associated with WSU. That's awesome.
There is also a student-run publication called Land Escapes. Have you heard about that?
No.
Oh, yeah. There's also a literary magazine that's put out by undergraduate English students.
Okay.
To which current WSU undergraduates are welcome to submit. They also accept fiction, nonfiction, and poetry.
Cool.
And they're run by a panel of student editors.
And what was that called again?
Land Escapes.
Land Escapes.
Yes.
Right on. Well, that's awesome. That is like the purpose of this podcast, the little interview thing, is to find out these connections between students and staff and
awesome.
and what's new with Wazzu. So that's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing.
Oh, you're welcome.
All right, I just have a few more questions since this interview has been squeezed into the opening of the studio. I appreciate you're being flexible with that. Your classes begin every morning with music, and I love it. I just love it. What inspired that, and what other roles does music play in your life?
Okay, so I sometimes forget to start music, so unfortunately it's not all of my classes every single day. If I have my way, I will do it. But that actually was something that another graduate TA used to do when I was a graduate student. We had this thing that we called comp camp, where we got some training in how to be some pedagogical training. This is my first year as a graduate student, and there were TAs who had been there, for a year or 2 years. They would sort of impart their wisdom. And this one guy called Jake Schwaller it was something that he did when classes gathered, because he said that if you have some ambient music that students recognize, then they're more likely to talk to each other. Because they don't feel like it's too quiet for them to talk.
Huh.
So it started out that way, and then I remember, like, it sort of evolved as I started teaching, because sometimes I would ask students, like, hey, what do you want to listen to?
Yeah. And
then that was a way to get to know them a little bit and let them know about my musical tastes and get to know about theirs.
That's cool.
And as far as the role music plays in my life, well, you could say, like, I'm tattooed with a bunch of musical phrases that I think are important. This one's not from a musical or anything, but this is an Elton John lyric that my mom used to sing to me when I was a kid.
And open out this cage toward the sun. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Thank you.
What song is that from?
It's old Elton John song called Skyline Pigeon.
Skyline Pigeon. Right on.
It's off the album Empty Sky from 1970. Something like that.
Cool.
So it's indispensable in my life.
Yeah.
Indispensable. I mean, I you know how, like, there are memories that you associate, and people that you associate with particular kinds of music, and it's just inextricable with so many kinds of memories that I have, and also to, like, my thinking process, and sometimes at certain phases of my writing process. So I don't even know how to answer that question. Like, it just feels so big.
That's fair. I mean, I feel like some people don't listen to music.
I know.
I know a few people that don't listen to music.
Same.
So it's completely understandable that your answer is I always listen to music, and it's a part of it's some way connected to every part of my life. So that's fair. That's awesome. And when you say that music connects with memories, that is, like, so true, and it's so useful when you're a writer, because the memories that you have of your life can be the foundations for settings and characters in your writing, and music can help remind you of those places, those secret places. I think
secret
is what
places,
you called them.
yes,
in fact. Yeah,
absolutely. Secret worlds that only you have access to.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yes,
right on. Well, I really enjoyed starting every morning with music in class, so thanks for doing that.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Really, it is. And I inevitably find some music that students are like, "What are we doing? This is terrible. Why are you making us do this?" And I'm like, "Oh, it's on a t-shirt."
And that's part of the fun of it, right?
Yeah,
that's
you're gonna listen to Bon Iver whether you like it or not.
I love it. All right, so I just got 2 more questions for you before we wrap this up.
All right.
Writer's block is probably one of the biggest struggles of being a writer, and I'm sure somebody out there listening or watching this is struggling with it right now. So, as a avid writer and writing professor, do you have any tips?
I have 3 tips.
Okay, let's
And
hear.
they're concrete. I hope they're concrete enough for people to use. Tip number 1 is lower your standards.
Okay.
Make your standards lower and just keep writing.
Hmm.
Because you can revise what you've written, but you can't edit what's not there.
Fair.
So for anybody struggling with writer's block right now, care less what comes out and just go.
Fair enough.
Tip number 2, set an alarm.
An alarm?
Yes.
For what?
Set a timer. I guess that's not an alarm, a timer. Set a timer.
Okay.
25 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody can write for 25 minutes. And it doesn't matter if you are writing about what you were supposed to be writing about or not. Just write what's there. Tip number 3 is to stop, take a break, talk to someone else about your project, and then go back.
Interesting.
That's something that I used to do when I wrote a column for an alt weekly out of Lewiston. And I would be convinced that I was never going to finish this, and I would go and talk to my husband, and I'd be like, "This is what I want to try and do." And he's like, "Well, did you think about this?" And I'd be like, "No." And then I'd go back, and it would be exactly what I needed to do.
Right on, right on. I think that's helped me in the past as well. Usually, probably talking to my mom, but she loves hearing about what I'm doing. So I'll share, this is what I'm writing. Like, oh wow, I've had a great idea because wow, I've been telling you about this. I can concur that is a super helpful tip.
Oh yeah, go and talk to as many people about your project as humanly possible. As
Yeah.
many as will listen.
Right on.
That you trust, and yeah.
Thank you for your advice.
You're welcome. I hope that's useful to somebody else that's listening out there.
All right, I just got one last question
Okay.
from you. I'm stealing this question from a podcast that I listen to regularly. It's called Ologies.
Oh, I love that show!
By Allie Ward.
I love her!
Yes. Oh, I'm so glad you recognize
oh my God,
it. That's awesome.
I absolutely love her!
Totally. Her podcast is like a huge inspiration for this podcast.
Amazing podcast. So
Right?
good.
Oh,
yes.
I love it.
So good.
Anyways, she always asks her guests what one thing they love and hate about their job, which is a real question. So I want to know what you love and one thing you hate.
I love when a student is struggling with a concept, they're struggling with a piece of writing, they're struggling with their writing generally, and I can give them advice, and then I can watch them start to. I can watch them stop fearing it. So good.
Yeah?
That is so good. I absolutely love that about my job, is making people who are so afraid of writing be less afraid. I love that.
Right
I will
on.
never get tired of that.
Right on.
But one thing I hate about my job. I hate the volume of grading that I have to do.
Yeah.
Oh God. Like I want to give like the best little piece of feedback, right? To somebody and be like, oh, it's this one thing that you need to fix, and then this is just gonna be perfect later. Which is completely hypocritical of me, because I tell students all the time, like, there's no way this can be perfect. You have to get rid of that idea if you're gonna go forward. So
yeah.
That often trips me up, because like I will avoid something because I'm a perfectionist, and so sometimes I will avoid things if I know I'm not going to be able to do them perfectly. So really, grading it's a monster, and it is.
I can only imagine.
Yeah. Yes, and I answer so many emails in a day.
Yeah.
I really hate email.
Fair enough.
That is a thing I hate.
Well, thank you so much for your time. This has
Oh,
been a lovely interview. I know it's been shorter than probably the last one I did, but I appreciate you nonetheless.
thank you so much for thinking of me.
Absolutely.
I'm really happy to be here. I had a fantastic time.
It's
Thank
awesome.
you so
It's
much.
been great getting to know you a little bit more.
You know what, Dayton? You too.
Well, you guys have been listening to KZUU 90.7 FM Pullman. We're a broadcast service of the ASWSU. I've been your host, DJ Daisy. This has been What's New Wazzu, joined by Jamie Flathers. Thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much for listening. Have a great rest of your day, and I'll be back next week. Bye-bye. That was lovely.